Welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore this year's Scorpio season, which begins on October the 23rd through to November the 22nd. Scorpio has quite the reputation. Scorpions can have quite a magnetic and intense aura about them, which can be intriguing, but can also have a tendency to be rather direct in their observations on others, but at times perhaps rather guarded and protective about their own inner worlds. I'm going to share with you the themes of Scorpio itself, but it's very important that we take a look at the event chart. So when the sun arrives, what are the other planetary influences telling us? Because Mars, the planet which is the traditional ruler of the sign, is in residence. Pluto, the modern ruler, is in a right angle with the sun, which could prove to be very challenging. Uranus, the planet which is exalted in the sign of Scorpio, is in a 150-degree quincunx. Now we also have Saturn in a quincunx too, along with Neptune, so we have a yod applying to the arrival of the sun into Scorpio on this particular year. But through that event chart, I'm going to share with you the exact house that the sun is in, and that's intriguing, particularly in terms of finances, our self-worth and our values. I'm then going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect over the next 4 weeks. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundel, a very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, we have found that over 50% of people who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please subscribe now, but also click or tap the bell notification symbol. Any likes and comments are also welcome too. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, please see the link beneath this video. They're now live. If you'd like to work with me directly, please see the testimonials on the screen now, but you can read them in detail by clicking on the link beneath this video. Now, just to say, YouTube has brought in, if you click on a link to an external website, YouTube asks you if you truly want to leave. And I think this is having an impact in not a good way, not just for us, but for a lot of people. So just know that our website is secure. It does have an SSL certificate, so you've got nothing to fear by clicking away from YouTube to get other information that we can share outside the platform. Now, if you are a member of my YouTube channel, thank you so much, but also thank you to my patrons too. I really appreciate your support. So the sun arrives into the sign of Scorpio this year at 3:15 a.m. Universal. I use Universal and Greenwich not because I'm in the UK, but because of the prime meridian. And I feel wherever we are in the world, we can all relate to this chart. And as the sun arrives into its 8th zodiac sign, let's just explore some of the themes of the sign of Scorpio. Scorpio can be very direct, as I mentioned, but does have that passion. And that's something that's very valuable, because through the sign of Libra, the sun has seen us having quite a few discussions. But were those discussions truly meaningful? Did we feel really heard? Were we able to truly achieve a balanced approach to the ins and outs in terms of our connections to others? Because one of the things that's important with Scorpio, if something isn't working, over the next month we could bring it to a close. But equally, if it's working well, we can invest even more of ourselves, whether it's financially, emotionally, spiritually, or intimately, into a situation where our devotion will be really valued. So it's an all or nothing energy, essentially. And of course, it's a water sign, so it's very much to do with the feeling dimension. But equally, because of that, traditional ruler of Mars can be very direct, and that desire and the reputation that goes with Scorpio is very much to do with being into instant gratification. Whether that's always true, I think that's a moot point. But one of the things that I feel Scorpio people understand is perhaps where they instinctively feel something is right or wrong. And if it's not feeling right, the chances are they're going to set a boundary pretty quickly. So that can lead at times to a degree of extremism, even obsession. But I think we can all learn from the energies of the fixed nature of Scorpio, because that's about continuity and it's about dedication and it's about really applying ourselves to the long term. But the intriguing thing about Scorpio energy is that when change comes, it tends to come in a very dramatic and quick way. And that, I feel, is where the energy of Pluto, the modern ruler, comes in, because that's about the transformation. So Mars is much more to do with being direct, and Pluto much more to do with the change. And of course, Pluto can be about the things we can't see. It's the ruler of the underworld, so it can be about leverage. But then maybe some of the lower energy of Scorpio can be things like possessiveness, jealousy, maybe even leveraging things in a way to get what we want. But every zodiac sign, every planet and every house has its higher dimension and also its lower one as well. But we are being asked to think about what needs to change in our situations, and that may require us to get beneath the surface, and that's another Scorpionic energy. Dive in deep and being open to do that. Now, we have had an advanced party, because on Monday the 20th, Mercury, the communicator, and very much to do with the discussion, aligned exactly to Mars, which is quite an abrasive combination, and they're still in touch with each other as the Sun arrives into Scorpio. So Mars is domiciled as the Sun arrives. But I'm going to share with you on the screen now the event chart. I'm going to share with you the solar perspective first of all. So I'd just like to briefly tell you about a wonderful opportunity to order your year 2026 personal transits forecast now. You get the rest of this year free, but also my special package, you'll get your life roadmap report. That's what really helps us to understand the patterns that are played out in our lives so far. A more intimate understanding of that, together with the transit, can help us to time our moves that much better. And also, you'll get your free gift of your Zodiac General, Love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for year 2026 too. Please see the link below for more. Now, the reason I share the solar perspective is because this is how we can all collectively view it based on the heavens above. So that puts the ascendant at 0 degrees in Aries on that vernal point. We can see that Neptune has just inverted back into the sign of Pisces on the 22nd. But if we look at the position of the Sun, so there's the Sun, 0 degrees, but we also have the Moon in residence, very close to Mars and very close to Mercury too. Wow, what a hot combination of energies those are. But if we think about the Sun, the square to Pluto, you can see, the modern ruler of the sign, and the quincunx through to Uranus. And then we also have the quincunx to Saturn and Neptune too. So in terms of Scorpio seasons, I think this one is going to be red hot. What can we expect? Well, I think we can see situations evolve where there will be no half measures. It's all in or all out. And we may encounter someone who's got very much a might is right attitude. That's the Sun in the square with Pluto. And we may need to push back. And with the Moon in such a volatile conjunction with the position of Mars, that's really, really very, very triggering. So if we feel that someone is coming into our space, not respecting our rights, whether it's around finance, whether it's around the emotional context, I think that we're going to assert ourselves in a very direct and very outspoken way. The good thing is that Mars and Mercury are in a very positive link with Jupiter. So we can express very helpful ideas, particularly around the things that we feel connected to from an emotional viewpoint that work for us. So that's very constructive. And I'm also going to share with you how the Sun will forge other influences through October and through into November too, which will show that we have got some very good stuff coming as well. But I think the event chart always provides the backdrop for the following period. So for the next month, I think there will be things coming into the open that have been hidden. That's Saturn and Neptune in the last zodiac sign. Both come into the end, their culmination periods, through big journeys through the sky. In the case of Saturn, 29.5 years by the 14th of February. In the case of Neptune, by the 26th of January, it will be 165 years going through the sky. So we're talking about a big societal change that's going on. But Saturn in particular is very much about outcomes and consequences. So anything that's been hidden or where control has been used, Saturn, or distortion, Neptune, in a negative way, I think we're going to see more stories come up about corruption, about where bribery is being used, about where there's been kickbacks, secret kickbacks, anything to do with sexual impropriety, particularly with people very much in the public eye. Loads more's coming out all the time, and I think there's a lot more to come, because Pluto in Aquarius may be accelerating robotics, AI, automation in a way that feels rightly quite scary, but it is also the sign of higher truths. And Pluto, of course, through its rulership of Scorpio, can be very much more to do with those passionate undertones. In Aquarius, it will push into the public domain things that have been hidden. And also, despite the fact that Pluto's in a square with the Sun and Uranus the quincunx with the Sun, they're actually still on very good terms. So that suggests that through quick moving media, there's going to be those revelations that are going to keep pouring out. But if anyone has been trying to hide or disguise things or use their power to silence opposition, I feel that there is going to be some very, very powerful revelations still to come over the next month. Now let's just look at the chart from a Placidus viewpoint. I use Placidus, I also use Koch at times. Other people use equal house or whole sign. But what we get with Placidus is that posse of players in the sign of Scorpio is all in the second house. Now that's everyday money, and that's intriguing because everyday money is the cost of borrowing. It can be the cost of our bills, whether it's for energy, whether it's for food, whether it's for anything to do with property matters. And I think we are going to see a lot of volatility around financial markets. You know, we have got equities which seem to be very overpriced, and that isn't really relating to the true picture for everyday citizens. So some kind of reset's coming, and then of course we've got the impact of technology on us all, which is creating a greater sense of uncertainty. You can also see that Uranus, the revealer and the disruptor in the chatty Gemini, which is the messenger, Uranus will speak out whether we like it or not. And so I think that Uranus is going to bring more into the public domain through the media about these subjects. But I think it's very important that if we are thinking about spending decisions, we are approaching things in a very reasoned and considered way. So from a solar perspective, we've got a lot of 8th house energy, long-term finance, and from a natal perspective, it's very much about everyday costs. And however much we try to control some of those things, I think there is unfortunately going to be some volatility coming, a big reset. Now let's have a look at those upcoming aspects. So I've told you about the Sun square with Pluto, it's exact. So I'm now going to share the upcoming aspects for the period ahead. We have the Sun in the square with Pluto, the quincunx with Uranus, and particularly with Saturn and Neptune right from the off. But the square with Pluto does become exact on the 24th. Now by the 17th of November we have two very positive aspects. The Sun's going to link to Saturn and Jupiter really well, but just know that Saturn and Jupiter have been on really bad terms over the last year and a half. Now they start to engage in a more constructive way, but that doesn't change the fact that Jupiter will be in retrograde by then. And then the Sun goes into a direct opposition with Uranus on the 21st, and also a lovely angle to Neptune on the 21st too. But week 2 broadly in the month of November is a chance, I feel, for things to perhaps feel a little bit more optimistic and positive. But remember, one of the missions of the Sun in Scorpio is to get beneath the surface. It's not about superficialities, it's about understanding deeper trends. Maybe some of the injustices that have been held deeply within us are going to explode into the open with that volatile set of influences as the Sun arrives into Scorpio. But we do have that potential for some upside as well. So Aries, your Scorpio season definitely brings the commonality of your ruler Mars together with Scorpio's traditional ruler of Mars very much into sharp focus. But your Mars energy is about initiation. If you like, Mars energy in Scorpio is more about how the story is evolving. Is the connection really meaningful? Is what you're investing in at this particular time really working for you? So you're going to go through a period of review. It could see you take a giant step forwards in a very constructive way, particularly around long-term finance, investments, pensions, savings, shares, inheritances and legacies, if things are all in balance. But equally, you may come to the conclusion that if something isn't working, and that could be around a romantic or sexual relationship, that this is the time to let go. Let's just go back to the recent reversal of Neptune into your 12th house. So it's left your sign where it has been since the end of March, going back into Pisces, joining up with Saturn and also the North Node. That's all very emotional, very watery. We have the Sun, we have the Moon, Mars, Mercury, all in Scorpio, very emotional. We also have Jupiter in Cancer, very emotional. Now they're all going to be forging very constructive links in November, and that's something to look forward to. But as this event occurs, because of the sparkling effervescent energies of Uranus in the part of your chart to do with how you think, and Pluto where you're strategizing for your long-term future, if you're really gripped with enthusiasm about particular plans at the moment, it wouldn't be a surprise. But what you need to do is master the energy of emotion in order to make sure that your instincts are aligned with your actions. Now, if that's the case, whether it is something very innovative and fresh that you're pursuing, perhaps to do with your own business or to do with your work, or it's to do with your interests, or it's even to do with your love life, that's all good and dandy. But if that's not the case, we have to consider with Scorpio energy that it can be that time of transformation, and we can ask some very probing questions of ourselves about our motivations, about those of others, and where things will go. So I think you're either going to go all in over the next month around something, or perhaps continue to make progress on something that's working well, or there is the potential you will leave something that isn't working very well for you. And that's really the nub of this. So the action energy that your ruler Mars gives you is wonderful, but at this present part of its journey through the sky, along with the Sun, this is going to ask some very powerful questions of you. If you are in a relationship of any kind where the power dynamic between you isn't working particularly as it could, so it feels like someone has to get their own way, maybe is a bit controlling, maybe even a little possessive, you're feeling leveraged in some kind of way, that's a classic opportunity to think, do I really need this? And I think Uranus and Pluto are reminding you, as long as you listen to your instincts, there is an opportunity to break out, release yourself, and to purge anything from your life that isn't working well. A bad relationship, a bad job, a bad lifestyle choice, a bad approach to your long-term finances, as much as embrace the positive side of Scorpio energy too. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Taurus, this year's Scorpio season is intriguing for you. Now, when it comes to work, over the last 4 weeks, I feel you've been putting a lot of effort in to try to be as conscientious as possible, attending to details and practicalities in a very virtuous way. Is it being seen, but most of all, is it really being appreciated? Because if it isn't, and particularly at work, you could find yourself entering this year's Scorpio season feeling quite feisty. And if you feel you need to push back and assert your boundaries, good for you, because with the moon conjunct Mars and also Mercury, if that's what you need to do, you're going to do it with a great deal of authority and conviction, because there is a part of you that can be very peace loving and you don't necessarily like drama. But the great thing about this year's influences, they can be very protective of you and can help you to set your boundary, but they can also be very positive if you need to engage and take the steps forwards to connect with situations, possibly situations you've been putting off. So you could find a spark of motivation, and that's very positive. Now, if you're someone who'd like to meet someone and there is someone on your cosmic radar that intrigues you, but you tend to be a little bit cautious, maybe even all the way to shy, I feel you're going to find some Dutch courage over these next 4 weeks. And it could see you taking the initiative and making that first move. But if there is a relationship ongoing and you do feel that it's worth persevering with, I feel there will be times over the next 4 weeks when you could get a little bit frustrated. But there's also a great opportunity in the second week of November as Jupiter aligns to the Sun in such a constructive way. If you did go on a date around that time, have a meeting, do a presentation, the chances are you can represent yourself in the most bubbly, upbeat and positive way possible. But if you are in a role at the moment and you don't feel very recognised or appreciated, the Sun square to Pluto and its quincunx to Uranus, and especially if it's around the financial side of things, I do believe you're going to speak out, and it may surprise the other side just how assertive you can be. But if you're someone who enjoys sport of any kind, whether you like to test yourself out against the clock with running or cycling or swimming or in the gym, or you do like to play a direct sport with another person like badminton, tennis or squash, this is a great month you're entering to really up the ante and engage with others in a more combative way. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Gemini, with Uranus in your sign, forging that dazzling link to Pluto, your individuality, your independence, your way of influencing things in a fresh way is likely to be very important to you at the moment. But you must be aware that Saturn has been joined by Neptune in the part of your scope that's very much to do with tradition. And right through to early next year, it may be that some of those ideas that you have that are rather futuristic or fresh might not necessarily align with some of the people that you need to work with, especially at work. And because the Sun has moved for you into the part of your situation that's very much to do with responsibilities, obligations, chores, the daily routine, the minutiae of life, you also have your ruler in residence, very close to the restless energies of Mars, but also the emotion of the moon. I think you may need to juggle things a little bit over the next 4 weeks. Deal with the things that you know you have to deal with. Those are the things that sometimes can be rather dull and boring. Because of your nature, constant mental stimulation is something you absolutely feed off, crave, and obviously you can be a brilliant person in generating different viewpoints, ideas and agendas. but you may need to attend to the responsibilities and obligations and the more structural side of things in a more patient, applied way. And if you can accept that, you can use the energy of transformation here to perhaps bring in some new approaches to your daily routine, get more organized, eliminate things that aren't so good for you, be more mindful of what you're eating and drinking, and just in general, taking life a little bit more seriously, which I know doesn't sound a great deal of fun, but it will pave the way for when the Sun moves into your opposite sign of Sagittarius, and that is going to provide, particularly in early December, some potentially wonderful opportunities for your love life. So if you're dealing with some internal stuff at the moment, just take it in your stride. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Cancer, the arrival of the Sun in Scorpio for you is a good news story because obviously you're elementally aligned, triplicity of water, but also because you've got Jupiter in resonance. Jupiter's going to forge a sparkling alliance to the Sun through week 2 of November, which can be brilliant in terms of your social interaction, but also manifesting and sharing with people any talents or skills you have in a very upbeat, bubbly and confident way. What's not to like? Well, the 5th house energy is also about children. If you have them, their social activities are going to be more important over the next 4 weeks, even their creative talents too. So you may find yourself really very deeply involved with that, which obviously could prove to be great fun. But if there is a creative talent that you've got that hasn't really been getting as much attention as you would like, this is your opportunity to really amplify those talents in a much more fulsome way. And because Mars is in resonance, Mars in the 5th house has a pluckiness about it, but your ruler, the moon, is pretty close to Mars as well. So you're not going to be in the mood really to hold back if there's something you're enjoying and someone close to you isn't quite getting. I think you're really going to be quite determined to go for it. But just know, with Uranus in your 12th house and Pluto in the 8th, both linking up with the arrival of the Sun, that's quite complex. So when it comes to your long-term finances or where you're very invested romantically to someone, there could be some things that are about to come out. Maybe there are things that are not necessarily easy to deal with, but if you can go through it, if you can try to keep a sense of positivity, but also warmth, even if something isn't going quite as you want, and even if something does change around your long-term future, because you still have Saturn and Neptune just nestling on your 10th house cusp. They're back in the 9th, so around a contractual matter, around anything to do with higher education or perhaps a legal affair, it may be that your enthusiasm won't necessarily be met with the outcome exactly as you want. But if things do change, just know it's an opportunity to actually realign with your soul purpose. And I think that's really what Jupiter's been asking you to do ever since the end of the first week of June, when he arrived in your sign. If you recall, he was conflicted by Saturn, so we didn't have the easiest of times, and over the previous year and a half we've had 4 contacts, big battle between Jupiter and Saturn. But I feel as you go into November, if you do need to orientate towards things that are fresh and new, just see it as an opportunity to springboard the door open to something where you can really dazzle people with the array of your talents in a way which is much more in keeping with the truer, deeper part of your nature. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Leo, your Scorpio season forecast suggests with Uranus and Pluto having connected in a very positive way for you for some time. You may have been encountering some fresh people, fresh ideas, maybe even an exciting relationship. But how does it really feel? And that's the big question with Scorpio energy for you. If it feels good, it could get closer, it could get better. If it doesn't feel so good, or there are challenges around what you share, and that can be childcare, it could be who contributes what, it may be around the financial budget. If those areas aren't aligning so well, it could be something that affects your inner world. Anything to do with your family situation, where you live, how you lived it, and who with, definitely comes under the astral microscope over the next 4 weeks. Now, if you're wanting to make some very positive changes to your home, perhaps because you've got visitors at Christmas time, you may find yourself with the drive and thrust to get stuck in, declutter, move the furniture around, perhaps even do a little bit of last minute decoration. But because of the moon being so close to Mars in your 4th house, I think your emotions can actually be quite changeable over the next 4 weeks. And you may also feel quite sensitive but fiery all at the same time, which could make you feel a little on edge, even a little reactive. And if you're someone who doesn't really like people to peer into or know what your deeper motivations are, the more privacy energy of Scorpio is definitely a factor. But unfortunately, because Uranus is a truth seeker, Pluto's a revealer, the Sun in Scorpio can be very deep in terms of our own emotional journey as a Leo person. I think if your instincts are to be quite protective and private, somehow or another, if something isn't quite working in the inner part of your life, maybe it's a family relationship which feels uncertain, maybe where you're living doesn't work for you and you're feeling very restless, it's too quiet, too busy, too small, too large, whatever it may be, I think you're entering a period where you need to submit yourself a little bit to your vulnerabilities and your emotions and not feel that that's a weakness, because it's most certainly not. But I think that will help you to negotiate this. If you're authentically in touch with what you feel is important around protecting your security, that's a much better way to work with this Scorpio energy. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Virgo, a very exciting 4 weeks is in store for you. The pace of life is set to pick up. The only thing I think is important to say is you can't please all of the people all of the time. You can't necessarily be quite as efficiently conscientious as you might like, because you're going to have to make some judgment calls on where to direct your energy. So if you spread yourself too thin over the next 4 weeks, I think you could end up feeling a bit stressed out, even overwhelmed. Because Uranus is being very provocative at the top of your chart, asking some serious questions, and it's linked to Pluto about your work, that may be pushing you to think about or learn or interact with people to gain more information to make some critical decisions. But those decisions may not be very easy. But in a more positive way, if you like, the Sun's arrival in your 3rd house suggests that you can feel livelier, you may want to chat more with people, you could feel restless, you may want to be more physically active, you could find yourself making more short journeys. If you're attracted to technology, a new gizmo may be on your shopping list really very soon. If you're someone who's open to internet dating, that can be something that intrigues you as well, even more. But 3rd house energy is exciting, but can be a little ungrounded. And that's where we need to bring in that more earthy energy that you possess to guard you, really, not to get too caught up in spreading yourself too thin and becoming just so energized, but in a way which is so buzzy it's difficult to actually gain or to gain traction in some kind of tangible way, which is always important to you. So, but if you are wanting to have a more social time, have some meetups, and just generally engage with other people, a lot of excitement is possible, but you need to direct that energy as constructively as possible. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. Libra, the sun makes its way out of your sign into your second house, giving you a chance to assess the progress you've been making over the last month. Now, some of that may have been new things that you've started. Some of the energy you've invested may have been on ongoing strands that you've put even more grunt into. And you have a chance over the next 4 weeks potentially to see your financial situation pick up. You still have Venus, your ruler, in your sign, which tells us that your personality power and your charm are going to be very much part of this story. But having Mars, the Moon and Mercury all very close together in your second house could make you a bit more impulsive. If you are someone who's been on a pretty strict diet, you could be tempted to break it. The energy of the Sun square with Pluto can give you quite the drive when it comes to being more speculative, but I wouldn't be driven by compulsion. So one of the things that's important, and of course Scorpio is a very intense energy, is try to use your critical faculties, your air energy, the way you think things through. Use that energy together with the help of Uranus and Pluto to assess things, but especially around the foundational parts of your life, so everyday money. When it comes to your love life, things could get more sensuous. If that's what you're up for, it could be quite the period over the next month. It could be very exciting. But equally in a relationship, if your values start not to chime with another person, that may be a little bit of an issue between you over this next month. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Scorpio, the arrival of the sun back in your sign is brilliant. It's going to give you a huge burst of energy and it's going to move you into the moment. You're going to feel more decisive. If you have been a little bit uncertain about certain parts of your situation of late, it wouldn't be a surprise. That may still continue, particularly around relationships, because Venus is still marooned in the sheltered 12th house. If a tie isn't working very well, you could be in the mood for a fresh start. Equally, if you're not quite sure, there may still be some more reflection to do. What I will say is the sun arrives in your sign gives you a much greater sense of certainty to seize the tiller of your life direction in a very firm way. And if that means being single-minded, good for you. But it is important not to do things that won't work for you emotionally because you're impatient to make it happen now. And one of the reasons that there could be a degree of impatience is the moon in your sign is in a conjunction with Mars, your ruler, and also Mercury. And that can make you quite impulsive, certainly impatient, to be really bluntly honest. But if you have been feeling a sense of lethargy or innovation, the great news is that traction is coming. You're going to find that thrust. So if you want to start something new, you want to inject an ongoing strand of greater enthusiasm, you're just feeling up for more challenges in general, well, that's all good news, isn't it? It's just that not only does the sun square with Pluto, it's also in a quincunx with Saturn and Neptune. Now they're back in the part of your chart to do with expressing joy, fun, sociability and your love life. And if there is something you really want to focus on, someone close to you might feel a little pushed out. And maybe also voice it through the square between Pluto and the Sun over the next 4 weeks. But once you get to the second week of November and the wonderful Jupiter's linked to the Sun, if you're wanting to really expand outwards with whatever you're initiating now, there's a high degree of potential for you to make that a success. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Sagittarius, the arrival of the Sun to join up with the Moon, Mars and Mercury in your 12th house does require a little bit of care, to be honest, because Pluto's in a part of your situation to do with the expression of your ideas, but it can be about beliefs. Having Uranus in your opposite sign and those two collaborating recently, you may have had some very, very important and even intriguing connections with people. But the 12th house can be a time when we need to pause, but it also can be a very sensitive phase and also a very deeply emotional one. In terms of the sun's journey through the sky, it is a period of potential reflection when we let go of what's no longer serving our greater good. And of course, because Scorpio can be about ends and beginnings, that is very pertinent to it being the 12th house for you, which is the house of culmination. But because Saturn and Neptune are back into your 4th house, very emotional and in a challenging angle, a quincunx with the arrival of the sun, I think if there is something you're unsure about, particularly people's sincerity, people's integrity, if there's people that you're wanting or have been contemplating connecting with, if you're not quite sure, probably the best approach at the moment is to take a step backwards. Give yourself the space to just let things process through you, decompress. And some of that decompression could be linked to events way back in your past. Because of having Mars in the 12th house, this is ongoing, but having the moon so close to the position of Mars could bring up suddenly a spark of unhappiness or even intense anger over the next 4 weeks, which could surprise you. But the other thing is, because Venus, the relator, is in the friendliest part of your chart, if you are connecting with people at the moment, it needs to be people that you have an emotional simpatico with. And because of your larger than life personality, people may be used to you being much more upbeat, gregarious and outgoing, but I think people that you can relate to even in an unspoken way, just energetically feel very comfortable with. Those are the people to align with at the present time, and steer clear of anyone who energetically drains you. They may not need to say a word. If you just feel around them that you feel overwhelmed or exhausted, that's enough to know that it's important to find some space for some healing, to reflect, but also release what's no longer working for you. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Capricorn, the arrival of the sun in Scorpio is very exciting for you. We're leading up to Christmas from this point onwards. If there are some festive gatherings you can connect with people around, particularly in the second week of November, I think they could be very jolly affairs. There may even be one friend that becomes much more important to you. Now that may just be in a friendship dimension. It could be it has a spark of romance about it as well. But around your long-term plan, because the moon is so close to Mars and Mercury, if things are inhibited in any way, you could feel a great sense of frustration. And part of the reason for this is Uranus. Uranus is in the part of your chart which can affect your routines, but also your nervous system, I feel. And having Pluto and Uranus together means that if you're working on things that are very future orientated, that can be a very exciting part of your situation at the moment. But to get to where you need to go may require you to just be a bit more strategic. And also the 11th house can be about our higher values. It's not necessarily about just the material world. It's not about physical achievement. It's not about business goals and ambitions. It's about the things that inspire us. It's about that higher purpose. And if you're not aligned with your higher purpose at the moment, this is an opportunity to tune into that higher purpose. But if you do have an opportunity to meet up with friends, have a reunion, have a jolly time over the next 4 weeks, you're certainly working this energy in the best way possible. But if there is a friend who has different values to you, it may show up in a very, very powerful way, almost straight away. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Aquarius, with the sun climbing to the zenith of the sky, the highest point, the next 4 weeks suggest you're going to do a lot of thinking, but also take a lot of action around your interaction to the world at large. As I'm often fond of saying, I'm sorry if it's repeating myself, everybody has different goals and ambitions. Some of them are more to do with the professional sphere, some could be more to do with local community activities, but your skill as a leader is something that can come sharply into focus. Now, whether you want that role or not is where the more transformational energies of the sign of Scorpio really show up. But if you are wanting to elevate your profile, you are wanting to seek a wider audience, particularly if you have unique talents, apply for a job, do a presentation and have an impact on people in the know, this is a fabulous opportunity. But with the moon so close to Mars in the 10th house too, you could find that your emotions are a little bit changeable. You may find yourself feeling perhaps a little surprisingly reactive, your mood up and down. If there's too much being piled on you at work, I think it's something you're going to want to assert. And that's where Pluto will come in the square, helping you to make those that you're connecting to aware that you have needs too. And of course, Uranus does continue, your modern ruler, in a very playful, creative part of your scope. And if your desire for greater recognition is not necessarily going to help you to showcase what makes you uniquely different, that may be something that doesn't quite work either. But as ever for all of us, the reality of finance is in the mix, and that comes from Saturn and Neptune in your second solar house. Now they're very late, the sun's very early, that creates a quincunx. So whatever you're deciding to do in terms of responsibilities, goals, there are some other things to factor in. Can you be uniquely yourself? Can you really demonstrate your creativity? Will it work for you financially? And it could be a little bit of a juggle. So that suggests you're not necessarily going to get everything on your own terms if you're making a pitch, but equally it can suggest that if you're already in a very responsible job and it's not quite as engaging or interesting, or it's a bit hidebound, the expectations are a bit rigid, you could think very carefully about self-employment or applying for a new and different position. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video. So Pisces, every year when the sun returns to Scorpio, which shares your water triplicity, it's always an opportunity to think about how you can bring some more spontaneity, freshness, variety and richness to your existence. And that could be something that really calls out to you over the next month. So if you have been mulling over perhaps going away somewhere, even if it's for a long weekend, or perhaps getting out into the great outdoors and doing something more rugged and independent, or perhaps thinking carefully about a course of higher education or a professional training course, those can also be appealing. If you are thinking about publishing ideas, perhaps even if you've got that proverbial book inside of you, that's something that can call out to you over the next month as well. But we need to be conscious of all the other planets feeding into this event. Your modern ruler Neptune has just inversed back into your sign on the 22nd of October and is very close to Saturn. So they're going to be in your sign through to the early part of next year, and they could feel a bit restricting. So the energy of the 9th house is about liberation, but liberating yourself from something that you feel is difficult to gain that freedom from can create frustration. So that can be a pinch point. Also, Uranus is the planet of freedom, but also higher truths, and that's in the part of your scope to do with your emotions. So even if you try to free yourself from something that seems unpredictable and restless, perhaps to do with your home and family environment, or even where you live, there may be an implication even from having some time away from it. Also, Pluto finally is locked into your 12th house and will be for a long time. So that's really asking you to do some very deep inner work. So if something feels out of kilter or unfair or unjust at the present time, what can happen with ninth house energy is it can feel amplified. And because of your natural sensitivity, that may in some ways create the conditions to feel overwhelmed. But I want you to know that that potential to do something different is very strong. And your traditional ruler of Jupiter forges a sensational link to the Sun in week 2 of November. And if you time your moves for that 7 days, particularly on the 17th of November, you could have a real stroke of luck. You may even encounter someone that you really like in a romantic context as well. But if you are feeling a bit under pressure, it would be understandable at the moment if you wanted to separate yourself from that. And if you can do that, even for 1 or 2 days, perhaps with a duvet day or hunkering down with a good book, a bit of escapism will do you such a power of good at the moment. Or you can go away for that weekend or a vacation. All of those things can be very healing, but I think there are some quite intense emotional strands that do need to be contended with. And perhaps one of the ways you can do that is through knowledge, because the ninth house is very much about knowledge. So having Mercury, the Moon and Mars all in your ninth house could make you a bit impatient, but I think they could give you the passion and the determination to find out more about a situation that you feel is limiting, is boxing you in, is making you feel a bit oppressed. And if it's something that you can change by thinking differently, gaining some fresh insights, that can be just as liberating as a physical separation from that situation. Thank you so much for joining me for this Scorpio season deep dive special. Please check out your year 2026 astrology overview and also individual zodiac forecast by seeing the link beneath this video.